Thank you so much for probably the best introduction I've ever received. It's the only place where you could be introduced by your maternity and not by your credentials. Thank you. In any case, wonderful. Let me just check the slides. Great. All right. Well, can you see me all right? Great. All right. We can change the slide. Okay. So in 1908, the Ford Motor Company introduced the Model T. And Henry Ford said, you know this, he said, I will build a motor car for the great multitude. It will be large enough for the family. He was a family man, but small enough for the individual to run and care for it. It will be constructed of the best materials by the best men to be hired after the simplest designs that modern engineering can devise. But it will be so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one. So the Model T had city uses, you know this, farm uses, and everything in between. Henry Ford's automobile was a great success. More than 15 million Model Ts were sold between 1908 and 1927 when it was replaced by the Model A. But there was a casualty: the horse. Model Ts eroded demand for the animals all across America. And that's because cars offered several advantages over horses. So we know this, right? But it's worth reflecting on. Speed and endurance. Cars were much faster and didn't tire out. The Ford Model T topped out around 45 miles per hour, while a horse gallops at half that speed for just a few minutes. So a 50-mile trip that might have taken a horse-drawn carriage 10 to 12 hours could be done in 1 to 2 hours by the car. Reliability and weather independence. So, cars aren't perfect in various weather, and these weren't perfect either, but horses were vulnerable to illness, injury, exhaustion, heat stroke, and extreme weather. Cars didn't require that kind of care. So capacity and versatility, cars could carry more cargo and passengers efficiently. There's no need to stable a car. You just parked it, saving time and space. And then finally, cost and maintenance over time. Horses required constant upkeep, feeding, grooming, shoeing, etc. New York City, it's estimated, spent more on horse-related expenses than on some public services in the year 1900. And cars slashed these costs. Next slide. There's also this. So this is one picture. There are multiple moments or kind of manure crises in New York City. This is true, of course, around the world. Sanitation and urban living. So horses produce massive amounts of waste. Cities like London and Chicago and New York around 1900 were absolutely clogged with filth and flies, and disease and typhoid. And cars eliminated this. It's estimated that in 1907, New York City had 120,000 horses, generating over 2 million pounds of manure every day. Every day. Yes, you heard that. I was like, that's a lot of manure. And this was very difficult to clear up the city. And finally, land use. So cars freed up a lot of land, and there were vast amounts of pasture, millions of acres that were once dedicated to horse feed shifted over to other uses. So go ahead. And then, so here we go. So the bottom line was that cars met the need for transportation and movement better than horses. So the population of horses peaked in the United States in 1910. It depends on which measure you look at. Some people count mules, some people don't count the mules, but right around 1910, it only took 2 years of Model Ts on the market for Americans to begin substituting away from horses at scale. By 1912, horses outnumbered cars in New York City. So like 4 years, cars outnumbered horses, and by 1917, there were no more horses in New York City. The last horse was put out of commission in New York City. All right, next one. Okay, so American culture was revolutionized by the car, and culture evolved. The culture evolved to embody a new form of needs meeting. An example of what the Polish anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski called functional theory. He wrote, "It is clear, I think, that any theory of culture has to start from the organic needs of man. And if it succeeds in relating the more complex, indirect, but perhaps fully imperative needs of the type which we call spiritual or economic or social, it will supply us with a set of general laws such as we need in sound scientific theory." So meeting organic needs. Horse culture gave way to car culture broadly and definitively. There's no going back without eliminating the car or its effects on urban and rural living, time and space perception, work and social roles, class and status, leisure and entertainment, language and imagination. People used to say, when I was in college, politics is downstream from culture. Today, we hear more often that culture is downstream from politics. Malinowski would reject both of those formulations. Culture is downstream from function, he might have said. Malinowski wrote, "It's clear that we have to approach the concept of function through the concepts of use or utility. In all activities, we find that the use of an object as part of a technically, legally, or ritually determined behavior leads human beings to the satisfaction of some need. Horses gave way to cars because of a profound alteration in needs meeting, and the culture soon reflected the same. Today, horse ownership is limited to the few uses that horses have left, and to those who value horses personally and have the means to own them. We might call these the horse enthusiasts. Because horses are sidelined today in culture, those who pursue horses for personal reasons have to put up with a society that doesn't prioritize horses, that isn't organized for horses, and finds little reason to make accommodations for what appears to be a mere personal preference." So you know where I'm going with this. Next slide. Okay, so children are like horses. Okay, that's actually the punchline. Children have been replaced by other easier, cheaper, and better ways to meet organic human needs. So the first depiction here is the need for help and labor. Children, in a sense, have been replaced by machines, by economic growth, more generally. Before, when people were poor, children helped increase prosperity of any individual household, right? You got married and you thought, we better get some kids going around here, right? Because otherwise we'll have to do everything ourselves. After economic growth, we think of modern economic growth, people are much less desperate for help. The second, next one, we have social insurance. So children served this need for old age support and were replaced by socialized pension programs. Before, children did meet an organic human need for old age support, and after social pension programs met those needs and savings, people got wealthy enough to save during their lifetimes. And finally, the third major blow, this is a box of rubbers, as they used to be called. This is the need for sexual union mating. And this was, children in a sense, I know you might be like, wait, okay, I'll explain. Children replaced by condoms in the 1850s, the vulcanization of rubber, and later in the 1920s, this is an image of a box that was circulated in the 1950s, but the discovery of, or the manufacture of latex, and then later by the pill. So before, sexual union required having at least a couple of kids, probably, if you didn't want to live a celibate life. And kids were kind of the price of sexual union. So condoms, at least initially, really drastically lowered the price of sexual union. So you might want to take a quick objection. If you want to argue with me on this, that's fine. This is a great thing to argue about. A quick objection, what about the need for reproduction? Don't people have a kind of an independent need to have offspring apart and aside from this need for sexual mating, sexual reproduction? So what we have to know there, if we're thinking about this as students of human nature, is do people have an independent need for children apart from the obvious biological need to mate? We might answer in the negative just looking at the data today, right? It does seem like people have been having a lot of sex and not a lot of children. But more importantly, nature seems to have endowed us with a very powerful drive to mate as the vehicle by which the need for reproduction is satisfied. And this, I think, stands to reason. If by nature we wanted kids per se, and not through sexual pair bonding, we would seek children apart from the unions which bear them, which is, on evolutionary terms, very bad for children. All right, all right. So in sum, the theory here is that demand for children just collapsed in the same way that demand for horses collapsed. The child culture gave way to a sex culture broadly and definitively. There's no going back without undoing that technological shock. The people who have children today are like the horse enthusiasts. child or kid enthusiasts, right? People who want them in spite of their uselessness and their hefty opportunity cost. And here, it's a bonus for the price of your admission today, not talking to you about marriage, but the demand for partnering and marriage collapsed for the same reason. Since marriage is the social institution that you need, if children come from sex and if children are needed. But children are the engine of marriage, just as the horse is to the carriage. The rates of partnering in marriage fall right along with the total fertility rate, and you can see that in every country. If this all sounds rather abstract, just consider how it is that young people are not out there frantically searching for a mate so that they can get started having children. Nobody sits down and thinks, right, I won't have a good life if I don't have a couple of kids immediately. That would have been true. They are still frantically searching for all other kinds of organic human needs that haven't gone away. Most young people see kids as a liability. All right, so I'm now going to move to the part where we talk about Thomas Malthus. Okay, next slide. All right, so there's our man. He's in the room with us. Malthus, okay, so given what's just come before, I think we're asking the wrong question about birth rates. Malthus and Ehrlich, and all the rest of the Malthusians, assumed that people breed like animals, even against their own interests, which is really amazing, right? Against their own interests. Malthus assumed that family sizes were not the result of a rational kind of cost-benefit decision-making, but of a simple biological relationship, resources in, children out. Malthus and other Malthusians believed that births could be expected, kind of counted on, that natality is an instinct, it's a default position for humanity, and thus lower birth rates would require external pressures, right, policy pressures, incentives, nudges, downward policy pressure. So, they might say natality imposes costs, social costs, like pollution. It's like pollution. That's a good way to see it. And requires some kind of solution. And that solution is take away resources, and people will have fewer children. So that was literally the eugenics playbook. Just take resources away from people who are most likely to have children, and they won't have children. So oddly enough, I think some pronatal advocates today unwittingly adopt the same type of position. They assume that people naturally want to marry and have children, and that family sizes are not the result of a rational cost-benefit decision-making, but of a simple biological relationship, resources in, children out. They believe that births can be expected, that natality is a default position, an instinct for humanity. Thus, low birth rates must result from some malevolent external pressures, such as low wages or high housing costs, downward policy forces somewhere. They would say natality is a positive externality like education and calls for some kind of solution. The prescriptives then for nudging up the birth rate share a fatal flaw with the Malthusians of the past. Give people more resources and people will have more children. Except the trouble is, I think the facts of declining birth rates don't make much sense if we believe that having kids or getting married is the default position of the human race. To begin with, birth rate decline is an absolutely global phenomenon, and it happens in countries with generous social benefits and countries without, in countries with Western values, countries without, in countries with higher levels of female education and lower, higher ages of marriage and lower. If natality is an instinct and low birth rates result from external pressures, we should be able to put our finger more easily on the circumstances causing low birth rates. Yet a look at the global birth rate decline would suggest rather the opposite. Second, by and large, women and men have never been richer or freer to choose their family size. To suppose that natality and not its lack is the default position is to suppose that the wealthiest, freest people the world has ever known have been able to choose all the wanted things except children. The position of the default natalists is not just that some people are constrained at the margin, that would always be true, but that everyone everywhere is constrained from reaching their true desired number of children. It makes more sense, I think, looking at this graph, to say that not having children is what all these free and wealthy people want, especially in light of the fact that family sizes show considerable variation. It's possible to have more, but people don't. Great. And then third, direct incentives don't seem to work to boost fertility. South Korea estimates to date it spent $286 billion. Hungary spent 5% of its GDP since 2011, and there's not much to show for it. Not only are birth rates low and going lower, projections of birth rates continue to be too optimistic. One after another, writes John Murdoch in the Financial Times, the projections keep missing, repeatedly underestimating the pace and duration of falls in birth rates. If people were interested in having children but merely constrained, resource nudges would work, or they would work on some segments of the population, but they don't work. Fourth and finally, birth rates have been falling for more than 200 years, but the inflection point to below replacement fertility resulted from the atomic advance in contraceptive technology in the 1960s. Not a political or economic treatment effect, but a technology shock. In the 1960s, people were not especially poor, and the nation was not especially family unfriendly. In fact, a very family-friendly 1950s and 60s ushered in the era of sub-replacement fertility. People were very eager to adopt hormonal contraception as the norm for marital life, and almost simultaneously as the norm for premarital relations. And so you can see on this graph, that's the ideal family size, what Americans reported as an ideal family size. It plummeted from 1960 to 1975. So I'd like to say that the default natalists, people who think this is like an instinct that will always happen, seem to have it wrong. Wherever people can get their hands on the means to reduce births today, they seem to do so. Adopting the notion that people fundamentally want to have children forces us into a kind of nonsense position, that the freest, wealthiest, most reproductively enabled people in history has not been able to act on their biological inclination to have children. If having kids is an instinct or a constant inclination of the human animal, we are surely the least functional species on the planet. No, I think it's vastly more sensible to conclude that having children is an act and a habit for individuals and societies. It's a mode of human excellence governed by the classical account of human action, the rational part of the rational animal. People choose to do a thing because they want its object perceived to them as good, or because they need its object, a necessitation that does or does not give rise to real wanting. The question we need to be asking then is what makes people want to have children? If children are not anymore necessitated, to whom and why are they still wanted? All right, so this is the more cheerful part of my presentation. It's not all bad. All right, next graph. All right, so 5% of American women are still having families as large as their early American sisters. That percentage has not declined since 1990, and they are as if immune from the low birth rate crisis. Who they are and why they do what they do is an important question. Do they have relevance, or are they instead like strange Arctic explorers, as one reviewer commented? In Hannah's Children, and I think you received a copy, I present you a narrative account of the first qualitative study of women who still want kids today. And so just to give you a little flavor, I have a few quotations for you. So why do they want children? So Leah was an accomplished musician, Jewish mom, with 5 children. She said, if anything, children are light. Every child brings a divine gift into the world that no one else can bring. Nobody else can do what that person is here to do. And yes, it takes so much self-sacrifice. But ultimately, I feel like my husband and I are really happy. We're really, really happy and fulfilled, even though we've had to work really, really hard to the breaking point at times. Her 5th was due just weeks after our interview, and she confessed, I've had to sacrifice some of my own interests and pursuits at this time. I don't think they're on hold forever. I think as a mother of a large family, you have to understand sometimes some things are on the back burner, but it doesn't mean the burner is off. It means you're rotating priorities as needed, and I've done a lot of that. She continued, I think that after having the 3rd and the 4th, there are identity challenges. It's not as easy to pursue personal dreams and pursuits right now as it once was. It's a sacrifice that I've made because I value having a large family and I value every child as a gift. But I wouldn't be honest if I said it wasn't a struggle. Finally, I think that part of your identity just evolves into motherhood being, motherhood being a really big tenet of who you are and what you're giving to the world, like a shift. And it's almost like radical and feminist to say that my contribution is healthy, well-balanced children, and that is a contribution. Like, it's not about my music career or how much money we make or any of that. Those are all secondary to what you contribute to the world, which is the future of humanity. The women I met, and to summarize quickly, wanted kids because they believe children are blessings from God, expressions of divine goodness, and the purpose of their marriages. They believe children are like health and wealth. You can't have too much of any of those things. They believe that the worthiness of having children proves itself over time in ways that evade human design and expectation. They were open to more children because they believe in a greater wisdom of which children and human generation were a part. These are the reasons of the heart, I call them, that overcame a calculus otherwise against children, and that's the calculus I presented before. You can read their stories. These are the child enthusiasts of our time. Okay, final parting words for you. I asked one of my students on Wednesday, right before I left to come here, what would I have to give you to make you buy a horse? And there was a lot of blank staring, and one girl said, but why would we want a horse? And another young man said in the corner flatly, a horse is just a liability. And that's the status of children today. So I'm going to leave you with 3 ideas. The first is that people are rational choosers. We shouldn't romanticize interest in children any more than we romanticize interest in anything else. Measures of unconstrained preferences are not serious. Everyone wants to lose 5 pounds. Everyone wants to make more money. Fertility gaps indicate something, but probably not what we think they indicate. Even the women I interviewed with 8, 9, or 10 children wanted one more child than they had. Number 2, revealed preference is the most important indicator of what people want and need and how they assess the relative value of things. The utility of children has collapsed, of having children. The opportunity costs have risen. Children bear an economic wound. It cannot be undone unless we roll back the clock on economic growth. Modes of production, savings, public pensions, and family planning. But that's all retrogressive. It's supported nowhere. The contraceptive revolution was the mother of all technology shocks. Policy nudges can no more shift the birth rate significantly and meaningfully than they can take us back to the era of horse and buggies. Yes, we should uncover and reverse those things that make life harder for those who want children, from housing to tax codes to social accommodation. We should take obstacles out of the way, but we should not ignore the fact that falling demand is the biggest part of the story. 3, fertile outliers today show that all of what I've just said is no cause for despair. What currently today and reliably overcomes this calculus is a personal conviction that children are desirable, wantable for their own sakes. People of all faiths and none at all who have children today are united by the view that having kids is as worthy of pursuit as other noble pursuits, climbing high mountains, making great art, and falling in love. And personally fulfilling in a long-term, delayed gratification, experience good sort of way. The great news is this is not as hard or as expensive as the failed policy approach. And I think that video we just saw sort of speaks to that. It happens every day. More than half of the women I interviewed did not want their final family size when they started out. Fertility desires are maximally changeable. Life experiences, new information, and religious conversions are just a few of the ways that people come around to wanting children. We can get that information to people. All right, kids on horses. Okay, kids on horses. This is not a program of do nothing. It's a program of relentless witness to the reasons children are valuable. Conferences like this one, films, books, documentaries, better research. If anyone wants to endow a center for the study of the value of children, I would just gladly accept. And being much nicer to all the quirky religious communities that see children as a blessing from God. The trad Catholics and the Amish, the weirdest 10% of Mormons, the Lubavitchers and the Bruderhof. Talk to them, bring them into policy conversations. Find out how they see the world and share those stories. Let them run schools and pass on their values. Don't close them down during national emergencies. Don't force them to get medical treatments that violate their consciences. Don't spend their tax money on things they find evil. Don't mock them when their kids get married before the legal drinking age. In short, don't try to make people who really want kids normal. Their weirdness is the national treasure that we need. Thank you.